Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. We will be starting our webinar momentarily within the next minute. So settle in and grab a nice hot cup of coffee or a glass of water, whatever takes your fancy. We will be starting within the next minute. Hello to everybody joining us today. We are DAC and we will be discussing today how to amplify impact and anchor integrity in the emerging AI landscape. We will be launching in just a moment, and I will be introducing our participants in today's webinar. This is a preview of findings of a report that Forrester has been commissioned and will be putting into market very, very soon in the coming days. And what you're seeing today is the first initial preview of that report. So welcome to everybody wherever you might be. We're seeing everybody joining, so let's get rolling now. First of all, let me introduce our panel participants. With us today are two of my favorite people. So first of all, we have Nikhil Lai. Nikhil is senior analyst at Forrester and a go-to authority on all things media, AI, and related subject. Welcome back to the show, Nikhil.
Thanks for having me.
And with him is Jenna Watson, our Senior Vice President of Media. Jenna is an absolute authority on the impact of technology and AI on the emerging media landscape and was recently awarded and recognized as having built the best female-led department in the industry. So welcome, Jenna.
Thanks, Nasser. Appreciate it.
Leave something for the rest of us, Jenna. Come on.
Thank you for recognizing that females lead departments.
And I am Nasser. I lead strategy here at DAC. So before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Yes, we want your questions today. So put them in the chat box and we will be coming to them over the course of today's webinar. We also have time at the end where we'll be covering any questions that may have been left out. This session will be recorded and shared with all participants and will also be posted online in the next couple of days. So watch out for that if there's anything that you missed or if that you wanted to share with your colleagues in your group. And the report will also be shared with you upon its completion in the next couple of weeks. So watch out for that because it really is a preview that we're sharing today. And there will be more material as part of that report. So let's get into this. Why are we here today? Well, as anybody who is paying any attention will attest to, we are living through historic times. The impact of generative AI is anticipated to be absolutely game-changing in terms of the work landscape, the media landscape, the digital landscape. And as impactful as we can see in this example here, as many of the big revolutions in the workplace. True story, I was showing this at a workshop the other day, and I realized that I was the only person in the room whose work has been directly impacted by about 5 of these big revolutions. So get with the times, young people, because this one's going to be a fun one. But it's not just the recent impacts that we can think of it to put this into the context of the likely impact that it's going to have on the workplace. We can go much further back. So this young man, for those who are unaware, is Johannes Gutenberg. And what Gutenberg invented was, of course, the Gutenberg printing press. Now, looking back through the scope of history, we can say that obviously the invention of the printing press was a great thing. It democratized information. It elevated people's literacy rates across the world. It was an incredible revolution from a societal perspective and for the good of humanity. However, at the time, it was deemed controversial, and in many environments and many groups, it was heretical, and those who operated these were persecuted. So I think that this speaks to a deep-seated human fear of radical change. This is very normal, and in many instances, it's very understandable. And in some instances, when it comes to AI and generative media, it is also, in some instances, correct. So there are fears and concerns around job loss, fears and concerns in a lot of regulated industries around legal and compliance, brand safety, right? Am I putting too much trust in the machine? And then the rise of misinformation, which of course will only be accelerated by this. So with that, maybe Nikhil, tell us from your perspective, from Forrester's perspective, what are you seeing?
Sure, gladly. Again, thank you for having me, and that's great context to put this in the arc of history, as I would say, because otherwise it seems like a net new change that we're living through, but it's helpful to remember where we've come from. So we mapped out just how radical and transformational this change is. As you can see on the scale, we have where we are today and the expected level of adoption for different use cases. And the point here is that generative AI is impacting literally every part of marketing, from language translation to dynamic creative optimization that enables better personalization, summarizing insights in social listening tools, automating schema markups for search engine optimization, generating code as a software developer, rendering short form videos. I mean, every aspect of marketing is being is being affected, and in some cases displaced by this technology. So to bring the voice of the customer into the conversation, we worked with DAC on a piece of research studying how marketers feel, specifically B2C marketing executives in the US, the UK, also Canada, I think, also EMEA. We tried to figure out, all right, how do they feel about the impacts of generative AI? And we found that they're approaching the technology with a mix of hope and fear. So as you know, as the last slide showed, they appreciate the breadth of potential impact that the technology can have, but they also fear, as you mentioned, Nasser, misinformation, brand unsafe activations, for example. And I was in Atlanta last week. I live in LA, but I was in Atlanta last week with about 60 plus Forrester clients talking about this very theme. And I can attest to the fact that verbatim, they're viewing this with a mix of hope and fear. There were some folks in the room who were asking me what this is going to do to their in-house legal counsel, and whether in-house counsel becomes a lot less valuable if you can train a language model on the LexisNexis corpus that lawyers are trained on for 3 years in law school, and then ask a bot instead of asking your in-house Esquire for advice on a certain issue. That's some hope, I would say, and also some fear mixed into that. Other folks in the room were talking about using a public model versus a private model. There's just so much uncertainty, but so much potential here. So to sum it up, I would say it's a mix of hope and fear. And as Forrester, let's put some data behind that statement. So by and large, respondents understand that this technology can significantly improve the outcomes of their media budgets. And as always, marketers are trying to do more with less. They're trying to work more effectively with CFOs and with boards of directors in some cases to justify the value of marketing. And so it's good to hear that marketers are realizing that, okay, this can actually help me lift brand awareness. I can generate more short form videos with this technology, for example, that then are running on YouTube, and they're really effectively taking audiences from a frequency of 0 to a frequency of 1. They're lifting my branded search activity because the halo effect of online video on search, great. So generative AI can actually lift brand awareness. It can also reduce customer acquisition cost. So for example, if I'm using generative AI to, let's say, create copy for paid search campaigns, and because I'm creating a greater volume of copy using the technology that I was able to do manually, I can test a bunch of variables a lot quicker, and there's volatility in those tests, and I'm saying, all right, I realize that these concepts are resonating, and I can get to that valuable insight a lot quicker because I have more creative to test, and because I can test a lot more effectively. Then when I scale those winning concepts, I reduce customer acquisition cost. So just two, quick examples of ways in which this can be a beneficial game changer.
So that makes sense when you put it in that context. Jenna, maybe can you expand? Is there anything about this that you're surprised about based on where the media platforms are going?
I am actually a bit surprised that brand awareness popped as much as it does. You're absolutely right, Nikhil. It gives marketers the ability to create tons more content, and you can test that content, you can put it live. So that's often been one of the problems with upper funnel media, including video. It's hard to produce, it takes a long time. This takes that away. So in hindsight, the brand awareness piece makes sense. But when you work in the platforms, to me, it's the customer acquisition cost and the total revenue, the more kind of performance-driven elements that seem to be kind of the way the media platforms have been focused for a very long time. So even before Gen AI, we had machine learning, subset of AI, and that's been infusing everything that we do in these platforms for years and years and years. So that to me makes perfect sense. I think it's really positive that marketers are recognizing that it can be used for more than just driving only to the bottom line.
So with that, with all of this potential and this impact, what is it that marketers are concerned about, Nikhil?
Yeah, marketers are concerned about two things. One is that they're not moving fast enough to deploy this technology and to reap its rewards, and their peers might be moving faster than them, and therefore their peers are getting better awareness and lower CAC and more revenue. That's concern one, is that if I'm not moving fast enough, my brand is losing share of voice, and I'm tempting the obsolescence of my brand. And another part of that fear of becoming obsolete is that if this technology outsmarts me as a marketer, then I have a harder time justifying my paycheck, and that's a legitimate concern. As we saw with the printing press, right? Or even Luddites, for example, in the 19th century of England, smashing technology that is now popularly used today, but it was threatening to them. The other is the fear of missing out. And one of the downsides of FOMO, and this applies to Gen AI, this applies to CTV, this applies to retail media, all these really hot topics right now, is that you sort of rush into the opportunity without the right people, the right processes, the right technologies, most importantly, the right strategy in place. And so I've been telling clients that it is more harmful to rush into this opportunity than it is to misunderstand it, and take time to actually internalize. All right, this is what it means for me. It's to say I'm a marketer at Home Depot, for example. This is these are the three things I could do differently with this technology, rather than trying to use this technology to then search for problems within your organization. So Nasser, I'd say that those are the two big concerns.
So given that context, how are marketers' priorities shifting now, especially in an economic environment that's so hard to predict?
Yeah. So one thing that we're seeing is that marketers are less concerned about weathering macroeconomic uncertainty than they were this time last year, which I think is a testament to the language about a soft landing that seems increasingly credible. And it's a testament to the strength of the labor market here in the US, consumers being resilient despite the higher costs of living. So that becomes less of a priority in its place, the kind of perennial marketing priorities bubble back to the top. How do I get more? How do I get $1.50 out of each dollar that I spend in marketing? How do I prove the efficacy of that dollar so that I can get $5 more to spend? Like, those are the classic problems of marketing. And so we just put out predictions for 2024. We said it's back to basics for marketers. They've disproven the metaverse. The economy seems to be bearable. So now it's really back to the sort of bread and butter of marketing.
So that'll be a question we come back to later, just around the ability to prove ROI, especially in the context of the changing generative AI landscape. But Jenna, how are you seeing these types of priority shifts manifesting in the brand conversations you're having these days?
Well, a couple things. I think it's interesting that three slides ago, we saw the benefit to brand awareness, and then we get here and we're like, oh, just kidding. We would like more ROI, which I think is pretty standard. But, right now, people's knowledge of how it's going to get used, the ability to work within platforms that have fully rolled out this technology isn't fully there yet. So there's kind of an expectation right now that we know that AI can be used to increase our ROI and our effectiveness, but we actually have even greater expectations for it moving forward. So even though there was a bright, shiny future where brand awareness was one of the key outputs 2 slides ago, we do see that there's going to be a lot of pressure on driving the efficacy of the marketing dollar using this.
Absolutely. So we know that marketers risk overlooking key pieces of successful AI strategy. So maybe Nikhil, in introducing the core pieces of data that you guys were able to uncover as Forrester as part of this research study, take us through the 5 key mistakes that you've identified in generative AI adoption.
Sure. Yeah, and just building on what you said, Jen, I think that as humans, one of the hardest things to do is to balance short-term and long-term goals. And what we saw in the data is that most respondents, which I think is emblematic of at least our base of clients overall, is that they're discounting their short-term readiness and they're overestimating their long-term readiness. In a similar way that they would be maybe focusing excessively on like immediate response from advertising and discounting the value of awareness that grows over time. So I think this has as much to do with the human mind as I think it does with this particular moment in time. So 5 mistakes to get to them. We talked about the fear of becoming obsolete and the fear of missing out, and so that is really putting the cart before the horse, and taking a client's IP, for example, and putting it into ChatGPT to get a brief back for the client. That's a bad idea, but that's an example of stuff that people are doing, and that's an expression of FOMO. The second would be that this can impact every part of the mix, as we said, and it's really important to distinguish between different parts of the media mix and where to apply Gen AI and how to apply Gen AI. But marketers are sort of conflating all the applications into just one. Let's just make our marketing more efficient with AI, without really being able to like disentangle the various opportunities here. That's mistake 2. The third, again, would be a bit about the cart before the horse. They don't have guidelines in place. They haven't like really upskilled or reskilled their teammates to be making the most of this technology. So they're not really getting the most of it without the right processes, without the right people. Again, FOMO in number 4, just focusing on what others are doing, and therefore insufficiently appreciating how this is going to apply to your particular context. And then as a result of that, the 5th, I think, is the biggest risk here, is not paying enough attention to the legitimate privacy and data leakage concerns that you run by using this technology. So not trying to admonish marketers, but rather express sympathy with the fact that we're all in a similar boat here. Forrester's trying to figure out how to use the technology to have a conversation with our waves, for example. We just released a new chatbot DAC, I know, is doing some work with the technology as well. So we're all in the same boat here, and we're all making these mistakes, frankly.
That's right. So let's expand on each of these
Sure.
if you can, then, Nikhil.
Yeah. So this data, I think, proves empirically distinguishing between current and future Gen AI use cases that marketers are underestimating their current preparedness and overestimating their future preparedness. And so that manifests, for example, I was just going back to that client meeting I had last week. Of the 60 or so clients in the room, almost all of them had their own language models that were built on open source technology, but that they were customizing for their own brand's needs. All of them are running pilots with those models. Let's apply this to our customer service reps so that customers are chatting with the bot and getting information quicker than they would having to call a human. Let's apply this to ghostwriting our executives' emails. You know, all the use cases that we've heard of. But the issue is that none of them knew how to evaluate the success of the pilot or when to take the pilot from pilot status to GA. You know, so they were prepared to deploy these short-term projects, but they weren't, entirely sure what problems they were solving by running those projects, other than, the problem of not deploying Gen AI. This data, I think, speaks to that.
Absolutely. And then the second point about topic obsession and thinking one-dimensionally. I think this is a big one, and especially from a regional difference perspective.
Yeah. So one of the regional differences we found is that respondents in North America, so we did the US and Canada, they believe that there is greater transformative or more significant potential for generative AI to help with innovative or new marketing activities that they cannot do today, compared to the marketers in Europe and the Middle East and North Africa. And when we double clicked into that data, we found that the folks in EMEA who are more cognizant of the privacy risks that this technology runs than the folks in North America, perhaps unsurprisingly. And we'll see how that changes now that our federal government in the US is being a lot more vocal about some of those risks. So yes, topic obsession, I would say, to us really means conflating all the many use cases into a few, and not really being able to understand which of the 12 potential opportunities should be prioritized.
Jenna, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the idea of topic obsession, it gives you that narrow pinpoint view. So we saw that everybody wants increased ROI. So of course you deploy it on your low funnel performance marketing tactics. That's where it's going to make the most sense. But what that causes you to miss out on is all the ways that it can actually make your holistic marketing program even more effective. So one example that we do at DAC, and we have done pre-Gen AI, is we do total SERP strategies, so SEO and SEM combined, which requires tons and tons of data manipulation, lots of lookups and pivot tables and things like that, and it takes a huge amount of time. Took past tense before Gen AI. Now we can take that and we can actually find trends that are impacting the SERP on the whole, areas where perhaps marketers hadn't really been kind of focused in on maybe a theme or a category in either SEM or SEO. And so if you're only looking at this still with like AI as a single topic to do a thing, which is often revenue or ROI associated, you're missing out on the value that it can get by doing more broad-based kind of holistic marketing exercises using Gen AI.
Awesome. And on to mistake number 3, which I think, Nikhil, is a governance issue.
I think it is. Yeah. So, as we've said, there are many applications of this technology, from issuing directives to robots.txt, to automatically producing audio ads, to translating copy from English to German, to creating images of a dog with a chew toy for your next ad. I mean, there's so many different ways in which to deploy this, to experiment with it, to scale it. But as we saw, marketers are, I think, trying to do too much too quickly, and they're not governing the tests with each one of these different channels. And so they're running all the pilots at once. Again, not really measuring clearly enough the efficacy of those pilots and spreading their attention and their resources pretty thin across these different use cases.
That takes us to mistake number 4, which is about trying to outperform other people as opposed to focusing on what's optimal for you. So were there regional variation that you saw in this?
Yeah, we found that respondents from EMEA are substantially more concerned than respondents from North America that marketing executions will be off-brand when using generative AI. Both regions are concerned, but there was notably more concern in EMEA.
Okay. And then the final question about losing track of the fundamentals of data security and privacy. I think this sits at the heart of the biggest fears. So could you expand on this, please?
Yeah. So we all fear the unknown, and it seems like the unknown with generative AI is persistent. And I mean, the risks are massive. Just this morning, as we were talking about, you know, the federal government is doing research about the impact of generative AI on nuclear proliferation. Like, these are existential threats, you know, that I mean, I just laugh because it's like it's so overwhelming to even think about. In a more constrained application of AI within different brand language models, for example, the issue would be deep fakes. The issue would be spewing misinformation, lying to customers, and eroding hard-earned trust that has taken decades and decades to win.
Jenna, could you expand on that, please?
Yeah, I think we definitely see this with large organizations in maybe more protected or maybe more secure sort of industries, which all makes perfect sense. But even before the rise of generative AI, those organizations and types of businesses tended to be slower on the uptake of new initiatives, new things that were rolling out in the platforms, et cetera. So there is, you know, not to increase people's FOMO, but there is a bit of a sense that if this becomes the one thing that your organization focuses on, you do stand a chance of getting left behind. So it's a very careful kind of balancing act here on this particular one. Fully agree, you need the data security, you need the privacy, but also you need to be able to kind of fail fast and move forward, because otherwise your organization will be at a disadvantage compared to others. Again, don't compare yourself to other organizations just as the thing to do, and don't have serious FOMO, but also move a little faster.
And of course, that this is a critical piece when we think about things like data security and privacy. And Nikhil, you talked about earlier the fact that people were putting this information into open source models, you know, using ChatGPT directly, and that kind of flies in the face of what are a lot of legitimate concerns about what happens to my IP. So with that,
Yeah.
we've talked a little bit about the mistakes. Let's investigate the priorities that brands should undertake based on, from your perspective,
Yep.
Nikhil. So
Yep.
let's start with this one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So skills development. So what we mean here, and what we found in the research, is that the most advanced marketers are using this as an accelerant of things that are already working for them. You know, they're not necessarily using this to solve a problem that nothing else could. So marketers are, you know, the most advanced ones are already investing a lot more in short form video, for example. As search becomes more social, you know, there's gonna be more TikTok videos on the SERP, for example, as Meta as well, you know, rolls out different shopping features. All of that demands more short form video, and generative AI can just accelerate the production of really compelling video creative. That's one point. The other would be like branded SEM. You know, the SERP is going to change a lot. Search will become more conversational with Bard integrated into Google and ChatGPT integrated into Bing. So you can use generative AI for keyword research, you can use it for copy generation, you can use it to create landing pages. So the point here is that this is really an accelerant of trends that we're already seeing.
But when we talk about those skills development, specifically as they relate to paid search, could you expand on that, please, Jenna?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What we know is coming from Google, at least, is much more integration with Gen AI inside the platform. So for the tacticianers who are building the campaigns and the ad groups, there will be AI interfaces in there. Now, the common misconception is, uh-oh, every brand that is like mine will get the exact same output from search when that happens. But that will be no more true in the future when it exists than it is today, because the input determines the output, right? So the quality of your input. So it won't be enough to simply throw a bunch of keywords at it and expect that it's going to work. We will have to understand how to get really good prompting even inside of search, because there's going to be big, if it's rolled out the way it looked in GML, Google Marketing Live, there will be big open fields where you describe to the generative AI what your business is all about. So prompting will be critical there. And that is not a skill that is as easy as it seems. We have people in our organization that are awesome at it. We have people in our organization that have to try a time or two to get the output. So that's certainly going to be one of the big changes.
So on that, let's go to the next priority, which is about generative AI guardrails. Talk a little bit about this, please, Nikhil.
Yeah, so many of the agencies that we work with here at Forrester have guidelines for the ethical use of generative AI, and I like those guidelines. I think that they're effective, but they can't be just like theoretical, rhetorical devices. You know, they have to actually make a difference in people's day to day. So one of the things that some of our clients have done is like quantify the cost of inaccurate information. For example, I mean, we have a healthcare client who is proving the fact that like misusing the technology is literally a matter of life and death for some of their end users, right? And so by guardrails, we mean like not just, you know, 9 points on a PDF that's evangelized in the company, but then actually going into each person's day to day and be like, hey, here's how this technology impacts you, and here's the sandbox within which you can play.
And the final one about using it for more than just automation, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah, so I was pleased as well to see that respondents are realizing the value of analytical efficiency here, not just workflow efficiency. And so summarizing insights. So for example, one of the clients I was speaking to a couple weeks ago is using generative AI to detect anomalies in their search data, both paid and organic and local. And they were just asking this language model that was trained on the brand's campaign data for anomaly detection. And the model was able to detect that Google was only crawling 1 out of every 6 products in their feed, I think. And so the model was able to help them, in that case, improve ROI. That I think is a great use case of this.
So maybe Jenna, can you talk a little bit more to that, and specifically around the evolutionary nature versus the revolutionary opportunities?
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction. So we're viewing generative AI as evolutionary and revolutionary both. So what do we mean by that? Evolutionary means doing what you've always done faster, better, right? Quicker, better output, more output. Revolutionary, though, is things that you could have never imagined doing before because you simply didn't have the capability to do it. You certainly didn't have the bandwidth to do it. That's a good example, Nikhil, of one where you can actually look at all of this incoming data and identify something that probably would have been near impossible to do manually before. And I think it's the revolutionary things that smart marketers are going to be brainstorming about. They will have teams together thinking about this, because doing things better and faster, that's great. Everybody's going to be doing it. That will become table stakes. The way we're going to get ahead is using it for revolutionary things that are going to change the way you go to market. They're going to completely change the way you analyze and run your business. So that's kind of the hope of what it's capable of.
So given that, We've talked about the mistakes, we've talked about the priorities. Let's talk about the opportunities to seize. So Nikhil, kick us off and let's talk about effectiveness and efficiency.
Yeah. So I think that full funnel marketing, has been a priority for years and years, but this technology allows us to accelerate the realization of full funnel marketing. So, we talked about search. Search, I think, now becomes a fuller funnel opportunity. Now that there are going to be more conversations happening on search engine results pages, and you can be focusing on maximizing your brand's visibility on that SERP rather than just trying to harvest clicks, for example. Video as well becomes fuller funnel. So with this technology, we're able to render more videos, hopefully more persuasive video creative. And then if we have more effective creative, then our linear TV campaigns can work harder for us. Our online video campaigns can work harder, and that's going to have a beneficial impact on search and social at the end of the day. So I think that this really unlocks full funnel marketing in a way that marketers could use.
So Jenna, an early example of this may be the use of, for example, PMAX as an indicator of where the search platforms are going. Could you expand on that a little bit and where you're anticipating it's going?
Yeah, totally. PMAX, Performance Max is its official name. PMAX is obviously the direction that platforms like Google are going. So if you're not familiar, PMAX, you feed it all of your assets. So keywords, titles, descriptions, logos, videos, images, and it will automatically generate the right ad for the audience across all of its inventory that it has. That is stymieing to many performance marketers because it's a bit of a black box. You don't get to say specifically, I want to serve this ad at this time to this audience. Rather, the engine's doing it in the background through its AI. And thinking about search in that regard, then if you're going to have a conversation with a search engine in the future, we have to think about what that means for the role of search in the funnel, because you're going to have a lot more opportunity to have kind of upper and mid funnel conversations with the search engine than you could today. So the effectiveness of these kind of what we've always counted on as lower funnel platforms, the effectiveness may need to change a little bit. What we think about, we can drive efficiency. We'll be able to do that. We'll get that out of the AI for sure. But thinking about, is this effective for my business, will be a really interesting question that people have to start thinking about.
Yeah, I remember a few days ago seeing this ad unit and kind of sharing with you and saying, what is this? I don't recognize this. And you're like, yeah, no idea. It's probably PMAX running it and
PMAX,
creating it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, the next opportunity, Nikhil, personalized marketing at scale. Is it actually going to happen now?
Yes, it will, and this builds on, to build on the discussion about PMAX and automation. I've been working with Google trying to understand what the roadmap looks like for the search generative experience, and the point I've heard from them, which I've been conveying to our clients now, is all right, in a world of maximum automation, your source of differentiation as a brand is the quality of your input and the quality of the data that you train models on, be they generative or not. And so when it comes to personalized marketing at scale, one thing would be like, knowing when to reach someone, knowing when to address someone on their journey. The other thing is addressing them with creative in which they can actually see themselves. So, was speaking to a running shoe client, for example, and now they're using Gen AI in combination with the identity resolution technology that they have. They're saying, all right, now I know that this woman that I've been trying to convert to a customer lives in this part of town, and we thought she was buying gifts for her own daughter, but she's actually buying gifts for her niece, and she doesn't have kids. So let's use Gen AI to change the look and feel of our creative. Now that we know more than we did about that customer or that cohort of customers, that I think is an example of scaling personalized marketing.
And I think that goes hand in hand with the next point, about
Yeah,
reaping the rewards of improved customer experience.
yeah, absolutely. So, I think that, and there's some broad confidence across regions here that net promoter score is going to be better because of this. The total revenue impact will be substantial as well, and that's really what this comes down to is customers putting up ad blockers, clearing their browsing histories, uh, clearing their cookie caches. They're expressing their dissatisfaction with audience targeting status quo. And the big tech platforms are responding to that, by beginning to deprecate third-party signals that are being misused, I think, for invasive audience targeting. And so, point being, CX is always the most important thing to focus on, and it becomes important, I think, to remind marketers that yes, when you're saving hours and hours a day by using this technology, that's fine, that's good for your business, but what is that actually going to do to your end customer? They don't really care that it took you 30 minutes to develop a schema markup instead of 3 hours. What they really care about is, what is the efficacy of that markup doing for their experience of your content?
So we have about, let me see, 20 minutes left where we're going to be going through some very specific and prescriptive ideas and examples of what marketers can do. But we've had about 25 minutes worth of data. So maybe, Nikhil, before we get into the very specific recommendations,
Yeah,
round us out and give us what are your
sure.
conclusions of the landscape as it currently sits, and then we'll
Yeah,
get into the recommendations.
yeah, thanks. So point one is that this enables workflow and analytical efficiency, and you need to focus on both to get the most bang for your buck here. The second would be that rushing into it without, investing in reskilling or upskilling programs, without establishing guardrails for the responsible and ethical use of the technology, rushing into it is, I think, more harmful than ignoring it. And finally, you have to be customer obsessed in your instantiation of this technology, because saving time and money for the sake of saving time and money is not even enough if it's not going to ultimately deepen your relationship with your target audience.
So with that context, how are we going to reap the power of AI while still protecting the brand, given that that's one of the big blockers and one of the big reasons why people are kind of tiptoeing into this? Well, I think the first thing to remember is that AI is an ingredient, not the entree. So maybe, Jenna, talk a little bit about that, because I know I heard a very smart guy say the other day that if generative AI is tequila, then our job is to create delicious margaritas, right? It's the
Right.
AI is not the end point.
Margaritas are delicious. Yeah, so it's not enough to simply look at your to-do list and check off, I did AI, right? It is simply another tool, more powerful than we've had to date, but just simply another tool in our arsenal that as marketers we can use to get better at what we do. So that goes to every piece of research that Nikhil just shared, right? You have to have the rules, you have to have the upskilling, you have to have an organizational-wide plan and direction. Otherwise, you're just kind of firing off all of the different AI initiatives that you can think of. So you really have to find that this is just another tool that will get you to an endpoint. It in itself is not the endpoint.
Thank you. The next one, think of AI as your first draft, not your replacement. And I think this is a really important one because in our experience, when people first start dabbling with AI inside of an organization, they're often looking at ways to make or to replicate other people's roles so that they can get to do their job faster. And a big understanding is that, or a big area to understand is that the real power of AI is to help you do your job faster, to help you get from 0 to 1 faster, so that you can then, as the expert who understands what good truly looks like, can then iterate on that and take it to 100 much, much faster than you would have done otherwise. Another big to do is about crafting these internal leadership roles and systems around AI adoption and usage. So we've been very early and quick in creating, for example, our own AI working groups that are cross-departmental, cross-functional, with similar and uniform approaches and sharing and understand how it all ladders up to a overarching strategic goal. But I think inside of your organization, there's the getting these things aligned, but you also have to align it with what's going on externally. So maybe, Jenna, a big one, obviously, for a lot of people listening in today who work within media and around media, is to understand how the media landscape is evolving. So maybe speak a little bit to that, please.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on this a bit already, but certainly understanding how to prompt AI to get the output is going to be the critical piece here, because the output will only ever be as good as your input, and that's especially critical when it's generative AI that is the function running that output behind it. But also, I think as AI becomes the system of deploying these things, it will change people's jobs a bit, and it'll broaden the responsibilities and the things that we have to think about. So while you shouldn't use AI to do somebody else's job, because that's, everybody wants it to be easier when it's coming downstream to you, you should be thinking, so for example, if you're a creative and you know that you're going to be running on a platform that can auto-generate and can apply new versions of creative almost real time based on signals that you're receiving, you need to think not only about the campaign idea and the emotion that you're going for, but a little bit kind of A/B multivariate testing mentality, a little bit kind of conversion rate optimization mentality. What is the thing that you're wanting this to do? And thinking beyond kind of your core job responsibilities and to how this can actually impact the customer experience, to your point, Nikhil, on the end of that. So it'll certainly make it easier, it'll certainly make it faster, but it does kind of expand and blur the edges of starting and stopping.
So you raise a really important point here, Jenna, which is around kind of the prompting, and that not everybody's great at this. And with a lot of people in their experience in prompting, it actually takes longer for them to use the AI if they're not as good at that. So this concept of building and maintaining a shared prompts library in the organization, so you're not starting from zero every time, but you're building on the work of people that have already gone before. So, maybe Jenna, just build on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're actually going to get into this in a little bit here, but every time you start to have a conversation with a generative AI platform, whether that's ChatGPT, Claude, or another one, it doesn't remember you. It doesn't know what you talked about last time. So you're constantly starting over from scratch. So this ability, we have some wizards in our organization that can go in and do what one of our colleagues would call first shot kind of clean output, where they know how to prompt it so well that on one go, they get the output that they were expecting. And I think that that's really important. That's really critical. That will be a skill that everybody needs to learn regardless of what their job function is today, because when you're telling the Gen AI what you want, it's still interpreting. It's still using its large language model, which is what it is, to determine the next best answer for you. So you have to be able to make sure that you know how to ask the right questions. That's going to be critically important.
So with that, talk a little bit about how this actually works and the problems that are inherent in it.
Yeah, so we loved ChatGPT when it came out last November. Everybody was super excited. It's got a great, clean user interface. It's intuitive. You absolutely know exactly what to do with it the minute you start to use it. The problem, though, is that it's a very simplistic process. You put your prompt in, it takes its default ChatGPT behavior, it runs that prompt through its large language model, through the neural network, and it completes and responds to you. The end. That's fine. It gets you what you want, but it doesn't get you the things that you may need to use it as a marketing organization. So there's kind of three areas or three specific problems that at DAC we're trying to solve for. So the first of those is brand safety, compliance, and security. So things like brand guidelines, feeding those in there and having the large language model remember those and know that it can always say this or never say this, and language rules. Making sure that we're compliant with regulatory rules, making sure that we have all of the different usage rules for people who are in that platform, what they can and can't do. That's critically important. The second one is that detailed context. So that's the thing where it needs to remember you. If it's going to understand how to bring in safety and compliance, it needs to remember these things. It needs to have knowledge of your product or your business or your service. And so that's that kind of long-term memory there. So if you give it that long-term memory, you can feed it all of these things for the brand safety. And then on the third point, it's the centralized prompt optimization. So this is where we talked about how some people in organizations are better at prompting than others. That's fine. You can also take the smartest prompters in your org and build lists of centralized prompts so that the smartest prompters are kind of always living inside this large language model. None of these things are existent today in ChatGPT or those other kind of large language models. So that's what we're thinking about at DAC and trying to solve for.
And how have we disintermediated this, and what have we built there?
We made a whole lot more steps, and it seems kind of clunky and it looks very involved, but it's still just as blazingly fast as it would otherwise be. So what we're doing is we're intercepting it between that first prompt, its regular applied kind of behaviors, and the output. We're adding in many additional behaviors in between those steps. So we are saying, before you give us the output, go look at the global rules, go look at the brand rules, the compliance rules, and then in this, we want you to behave as though you are X role or X title within our organization. So you will have to behave the way that sort of person would. Embed all previous context that you know about us, about our business, about our service, and make sure that you get all of that and you bring it together before you take that back to the large language model and give us the output. So it really does add in those three kind of big buckets by at each of these steps layering on additional behaviors to that prompt so that you get a more fulsome and brand safe response out of the end.
So at DAC, what we have built that we are using for ourselves, and especially for brands that we're testing right now in heavily regulated industries with legal and compliance, is Guardrail, our generative AI interface, which interfaces with these large language models, but in a brand controlled, efficient, and safe environment to try to address these. And our experience so far is at least a 2 times output using the same resources in the same time. In many of the tasks that we've been talking about, many multiples of that. And what's really exciting is the ability and opportunity to do things that we've never even considered as being options for ourselves. So the key advice that we're providing here is, first of all, AI is an ingredient, not an entree. Think of it as your first draft. Craft internal AI leadership and understand the changes that are coming. Pick the right AI tools for the job. So create systems for the tool reviewing, testing, and so on. Realize that progress will be incremental, right? Build a shared prompts library internally, understand strategically where the organization is going and who needs to be involved in this. So it's done collaboratively across the organization in a well-governed way. And then consider talking to DAC about Guardrail, which is our generative AI platform. So with that, we will be sending the study as soon as it's available in the next couple of weeks. We have a few minutes for questions, and I can see one here. So maybe Nikhil, you talked early and showcased data about how people were expecting and anticipating this would lead to improved customer acquisition costs, improvement in brand awareness, and so on. Obviously, a critical part of that is measurement. How do you see measurement models and frameworks changing, given these sorts of generative experiences that we're seeing more and more of?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think that this is going to make some KPIs obsolete. To be frank, I think that KPIs that are click-based, aka click-through rate, or KPIs that are rank-based, such as ranking and average position, become a lot less important in a world where consumers are having complex, multimodal, rich conversations with search engines or personal assistants, with Forrester's website. We're making our website more conversational. That's not something that Google or Microsoft is doing. And so I think in place of click-centric, ranking-centric measurement, you focus a lot more on the value of an impression, and you can have search transacted on CPMs, you have short-form video transacted on CPMs, long-form video, and then that CPM becomes the unit of measurement to hold every channel in your mix accountable to certain goals for visibility or certain goals for aided or unaided awareness, for example. And as CPM becomes the currency of record, if you will, then you have to be more intentional about correlating CPM to CPA. or cost per install if you're a mobile advertiser. And Jenna, you and I have spoken about this many times. The value that an impression has is not just in and of itself. That value applies to someone when they're in store, for example, when they're within another app. And so cross-channel measurement, to sum it up, becomes the name of the game.
So Jenna, I can imagine telling traditional performance marketers cost per click and click-through rate is not going to be the thing. How do you think they're going to respond?
Terrifying. that is not going to be okay for a lot of people, right? Because we're taking away. Think of how this industry, how digital in particular, has grown. At first, we had contextual things where we were targeting people based on the content and does it match roughly what I'm trying to sell them? Great, check. Then we got super addicted to our third-party cookies and our data that told us this person right now is looking at these pair of pants, go send them a retargeting ad with that pair of pants in them. Wow. When you have to think about this person might be talking about I need an outfit to wear to an offsite business meeting, and that's how their chat starts. You're not going to be probably in there thinking about that. You're going to be thinking about how do I get the click for that pair of pants that I sell. We're going to have to start thinking about the value of getting in front of the audience as the end goal. It is no longer going to be the click, to your point, Nikhil, but getting in front of the right audience at the right time, even if that happens to be in a search generative experience.
Yeah, that's going to be a real challenge for a lot of people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So one last question that's come in, Nikhil, put on your predictive hat. How do you think this landscape changes 12 months from now?
I think that everybody on the call, DSC, Forrester, we're going to have our own models that are trained on our intellectual property and that actually end up deepening our moat. Because living in California, I'm sensitive to the history of the gold rush, and one thing that I've been thinking about lately is that we're sort of in the phase now with Gen AI where everybody's getting better picks and shovels to mine for insights. Great, it takes less time to mine, but the real riches come from knowing where to mine. And knowing where to mine requires a sense of discretion and a sense of history that is really distinctive. And so 12 months from now, we all have our own models. We're all focused a lot more on where to mine than on reducing the time to mine.
Jenna, any final words?
That was an awesome analogy. I really like it. And as a somewhat former Luddite who read way too many sci-fi novels in her youth, I will say I am fully embracing generative AI in our marketing initiatives. And so therefore, my FOMO is minimal. And I encourage everybody else to go figure out what it is that's going to work for them and avoid the FOMO also.
I know we have a couple more questions that are in the list here, but we are out of time. But please, for those folks who we weren't able to get to your questions, follow up with us directly and we'll be happy to get those addressed. This webinar has been recorded, will be posted shortly for you to kind of review and share, and the materials will be sent out, the actual reports, in a couple of weeks once it's all finalized. But I want to really thank Jenna Watson for joining us today, and Nikhil Lai as well, and sharing these previews and these insights with the audience. It's always great to have you here. You always put on a great show and so insightful, especially in a subject that so many people are tiptoeing around right now. So thank you very much for joining, and thank you for everybody who's listened in. Take care, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks all.